as we know, or as we should know as a community, is that animal abuse is just a symptom of a bigger problem within the family.
Do you think public opinion about cruelty, public perception on animal cruelty has changed, and how?
Well, I think that there's certainly, people know about it more. When big cruelty cases happen, it's more advertised, it's more talked about, and people get more upset about it. So I think that, you know, each year we on average investigate about 1,200 complaints. And that's pretty consistent, that number stays the same. But we've seen sort of a switch in what the complaints actually are. Many years ago, we would receive numerous complaints about dogs tied outside. That was probably one of our biggest complaints. And while that's still pretty relevant for us, it's not really the main complaint that we get right now. One of the bigger complaints that we have right now are people with an overabundance of animals, specifically cats. The public is more aware of cruelty because we try to get the word out there about big cruelty complaints. And I hope that there are less dogs tied outside, and there are more people that are trying to be aware when they get an animal of doing the right thing so that they do not end up receiving a visit from us.
Do you think that people are less willing to tolerate neglectful behavior or abusive behavior that they might see in their own neighborhood? Or do you think people are more likely to do something now than they were, say, 10 or 20 years ago?
Absolutely, I do. I think first and foremost because they know who to call, and they know that something can be done about it, and because it's more out there what the laws are and what people can and can't do. So maybe someone, maybe even if they're not sure, if they see a dog tied outside or whatever the case may be, a horse without shelter, they may, even if it's not something that we can address, at least they've made the call and we can check on it. So I do think that more people are more comfortable to call now than they were in years past. When I look at Pennsylvania state laws and then I compare them to other laws within the United States, I think that we're somewhere in the middle. There's certainly many states that have less than what we have, but there are more progressive states as well. So I think that the way our laws are written, there is some interpretation. But my biggest concern is that mainly what we see here are summary complaints. And unfortunately, the way the law is written right now, if someone commits a crime of starving their animal to death or not providing it with adequate shelter, that is a summary offense. And I do feel that we would like to see more of a stiffer penalty for those people, because right now the penalty is $50 to $750 and or 90 days in jail. And again, that's something that the magistrate sets. That's not something that we are able to set as much as we wish we could. So I think that if the fines were stiffer, that maybe the magistrates may be more willing to give a higher fine or possibly some jail time, because jail time is something we rarely see.
And the jail time is there.
It is there.
District judges could impose
absolutely
90 days in your county prison
for a first offense for cruelty.
But they almost never do.
They almost never do. And not to speak for them, but I think that sometimes if it's a first offense or if it's not in the eyes of the magistrate a particularly egregious crime, they are very hesitant to give the maximum penalty. But there are times when, depending on the situation, we will ask for the maximum penalty if it's something that we feel is horrific and warrants that.
Is it a matter of the laws not being adequate, or are they not being adequately enforced?
Well, and that's a great question, because I do think that the groundwork is there for them to truly be enforced. But again, as we're talking about, they hardly ever are. And I do think that if more stiffer penalties were imposed, that maybe that would set a precedence for other magistrates to do, and perhaps it would make people a little less likely to commit cruelty because they know that there is a serious penalty and not just a slap on the wrist.
You would like to see starvation increased from a summary non-traffic ticket to an actual criminal charge.
Absolutely, and since we've had some starvation cases, we have talked about it on the state level, and it's been brought to my attention that perhaps, depending on the magistrate and depending on the situation, perhaps we could get it through as a misdemeanor. And we certainly have the intent of trying that. Lord knows we don't want another starvation case, but we know inevitably one will happen, and if that does occur, we will try to get it through as a misdemeanor and just see how that happens.
the state legislature passed the puppy mill law.
Yes.
It was a huge, huge change in how business is done for commercial kennels.
Yes.
What impact did public opinion have on those laws being passed, in your opinion?
Well, again, because of the publicity for commercial breeding facilities, or as the public calls them, puppy mills, and just people getting the word out about what really happens behind the scenes on those farms and on those, in those mills, if you will. I think it just infuriated people. It educated people on things that they didn't know. And I can tell you that that's something that I'm very familiar with, because the Safe Harbor program is something in Pennsylvania that was enacted by shelters where we would take in puppy mill dogs. Because, of course, these new laws and the new regulations for kennels, some of the owners of these kennels were unwilling or unable to comply with the new regulations, and therefore they were going to close their kennels or downsize. And what that meant was a lot of displaced dogs that had nowhere to go. And the first alternative would have been for those dogs to be sold at another auction, only to continue their horrible life of breeding at another facility. So the Safe Harbor program was enacted so that we can take in those dogs from these places and give them a second chance at having a real life. These dogs are not your normal family pet. They are unsocialized, they are not housebroken, and these are adult dogs that have lived their entire life in a cage. So you can imagine they don't have the luxury of a normal family pet that goes in and out and, you know, gets walked and all sorts of things. So while we were happy to take them in, we recognized that there were some challenges with that. And adopters coming in here need to know that while you may want to say that you rescued a puppy mill dog, you really need to know that you're going to have to put some work into those dogs. And there were some dogs that were really, I don't want to say so far gone, but so damaged from living that way that we had some rescue groups help us out with them that can really take the time for that particular breed and, you know, put them in foster homes and try to bring them back to normal. But we have seen dogs just make remarkable recoveries here that have come in just almost like catatonic, you know, really not even knowing what was happening when they were being held by a person, to 6 weeks down the road, little tails wagging, little wonderful dogs. So it has been absolutely so rewarding. But I do think that the public's outcry and the pressure, they put pressure on the Department of Agriculture to really upgrade the laws and change them to the best of their ability, and the department has done that. Right now, of course, outside dogs are a big issue, not only for shelters. I mean, for me personally, having investigated many outside dogs, it's really a terrible thing to see a dog being made to live outside a lonely, solitude life. We all know that dogs are pack animals. They want to be with us. They want to be with other dogs. And so to me, that was one of the most disheartening situations for me to see. So there is some pending legislation to help with that. And, you know, if and when the language gets where it needs to be in that bill, we will certainly be on board with that as well, because an outside dog really has no life.
And that's basically what's being known as the anti-tethering legislation?
Yes.
And it would limit the amount of time you could chain a dog outside per day.
Absolutely. And there is, I believe, some concern that, you know, depending on the hours, if someone works maybe second shift, so their dog's out late at night, but it really depends on the length, the hours that the dog is out. You know, and again, you know, like everything, it's not perfect, but it's getting there, and it certainly has the best of intentions.
People who see what they think is abuse or neglect, what do they do?
They call here. We have a Humane Society police officer. We're on call 24/7 for urgent cruelty investigations. 764-6109 is our number, and you can remain anonymous if you wish. And even if you're not sure, even if you're on the fence about it and just want, you know, someone to check it out, please make the call, because we rely on the community to be our eyes. We can't be everywhere all the time. We can't see everything. So really, we rely on people to give us a heads up about situations and let us know if it's something that we need to look into. So please, if you have a concern, if you're not quite sure, just please make the call. I hope that someday chained dogs will not be a reality in our community anymore.